Welcome back, everyone. I was going to film this video on a scenic hike in front of a beautiful view, but it started raining, so it's the warehouse today. Listen, I just turned 21 years old, and I wanted to share in today's video some lessons that I've been able to pinpoint as massive game changers in my short-lived life thus far. I do want to start out by addressing the elephant in the room. I'm only 21 years old, and I'm sure in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot more that I'll be learning. And these 9 lessons that I want to discuss, yes, are only validated by simply just a few years of me applying them. But nonetheless, these are things I wish I would have realized a little bit earlier, seeing this video around 15, 16 years old. I think society is full of so much chaos, information overload. It's so terribly easy to be overwhelmed by the vast amount of messages, information, advertisements coming our way, all the different ways that we know we should improve ourselves. We struggle with clarity, we struggle with focus, and looking back in retrospect, these lessons are the 9 things that I wish I really would have focused on a little bit more, because now, and I certainly can't speak for the future, but at least now they do bring me a decent level of happiness and fulfillment. The first thing I want to share is the following. Just because someone else can say it better than you doesn't mean that you shouldn't say it at all. Allow me to kind of break that down. In the past, I found myself in these situations where I've been surrounded by people who are far more knowledgeable than I am on a particular subject. Maybe they're a 9 out of 10 in a certain category and I'm a 2 out of 10. In these situations, I've been hesitant to share my opinion or my experiences on whatever we're talking about because I felt that it was such a basic level of knowledge that they would have already heard this before. They would have heard this 1,000 times before, or because I know they can say it better. They are more articulate. They're a better communicator. They've got a better vocabulary and a better verbal package, so it's not worth me stuttering this thought out. I feel this is also something creators struggle with as well. Let's take YouTube, for example. I've certainly felt where I wanted to share some information, but I've just never pulled the trigger on filming a video because why would someone listen to me on this subject when they likely would have heard it from this person, or this person has covered this 1,000 times before? I think there's 2 important things that I've learned to understand here. Number 1, you have the full picture because you are involved in that space or that niche. You're talking with people on a daily basis. You're watching videos of other creators in your space, for example, and it's very easy when that is your world to feel like it's oversaturated. You never know when someone is just tapping into that landscape for the first time, and you're the very first person they interact with, and they're learning from you. I've also realized that just by communicating these ideas or my basic understanding on something, even if I was mistaken, I became a better communicator in the process and was able to understand that idea just a little bit better. And there's been many situations as well where people have actually jumped in, noticed my hunger for learning, and have very quickly bridged that gap, my 2 out of 10 understanding, and have taken that to the next level. So I say all this to make the point, never be afraid or hesitant to share your opinion or your experiences because you become a better communicator in the process. What do they say? The best way to teach, the best way to learn is to teach or share information. It becomes really ingrained in your mind that way. And the second nuance is you never know who's learning from the first time and is actually learning from you in that process. Another thing that I think is also very important is to stop overanalyzing the details. There have been these situations where I would find myself mid-conversation with someone or post-conversation, and I would immediately just start panicking and picking apart all the little things that I said, up to the tonality of my voice. Oh my gosh, did I really put emphasis on that word in particular? What if that person interprets it a different way or the wrong way, perhaps? I'll give you one example just to kind of unpack this point with. I was at the gym one morning, probably about a year ago, and I was carrying my phone. I was walking out the door, and I was carrying my phone in such a way that it looked like I was actually flipping someone off. Completely unintentional, just one of those accidents. And the woman angrily confronted me, thought I was actually insulting her visually. And of course I was defending myself, and it was just one of those moments that stayed with me for about a week. Mentally, I did not want to face that woman again. I didn't go to the gym for about a week. And when I actually did open up the doors and walk in, big smile on her face, greeted me as she normally did. And it was just at that moment that I literally stopped and looking back in retrospect was thinking, did I really just overthink this? What did I think was going to happen? She was waiting behind the glass doors with an RPG waiting to blow me to kingdom come. I have no idea. We just overthink so much in life. No one's perfect. Everyone always has these moments. And I don't have a magic solution for dealing with this issue. But I've learned two things in particular. Number one is just to shut those thoughts down when you're tempted to overthink something. And number two is to realize that those feelings of awkwardness or cringe or regret, however you want to describe them, are only going to decrease the further you get from that actual event happening. All you need is just to give yourself a day and it's down to 50%. So that recognition that time is kind of the magic formula here for resolving this issue is very reassuring, at least for me. The third lesson I want to share, or the third thing I want to reflect upon, is to be a sidekick, not just the hero. I know this sounds like a tagline to some soon-to-be coming in theaters film, but let me break this down for you. We live our lives through our narrative. We are the hero, we are often the protagonist, well, we are the protagonist of our own story. We often forget that everyone else has that same conscious experience. Everyone else is working towards some sort of goal or objective. It's very easy to simply keep our heads down and focus on whatever we're working on and turn a blind eye or simply ignore the challenges and obstacles that other people are dealing with. The solution, or at least something that I've tried to foster in these scenarios, is to be a sidekick in other people's lives. A sidekick, just for clarity's sake, is a helping associate, someone who's there to aid in the fight. Now, this is not a revolutionary idea by any means, but I think it's just an interesting pair of glasses to live life through. And more I found myself conscious of and starting to be more aware of what is this person trying to accomplish? What is their goal and objective? And just seeing those opportunities where I can step in and fill the void. Now, of course, this doesn't mean you just focus on someone else's narrative. You have your own life to live as well. But just being conscious of what other people around you are trying to accomplish and asking yourself the question, how can I be a stepping stone, a very little stepping stone, in helping them accomplish that goal in some way, shape, or form? I think that is just a very healthy mentality. And more times than not, at least in my situation, I found that willingness to help does often come back to you. The other thing I wanted to talk about, the fourth lesson, if you will, is to be happy for others' success. This is something that I just think the sooner you can realize it, the better. We have this tendency to view others' gain as somehow our loss. If someone else is gifted $1, for example, we often interpret that as, well, that's $1 that I could have had. And we'll view these with jealousy, or we'll view them with what's called the crab mentality. If you picture a bunch of crabs in a bucket, all trying to clamber their way out for freedom, just about as one is going to make its way over the edge, what do the others do? Well, they pincer its leg, they pull it back down into the depths of the bucket. It's basically the idea, if I can't have success or freedom, then neither can you. You've realized a couple of things, and again, these aren't revolutionary, these are just things that I've really tried to keep in the forefront of my mind in these situations. Number one, success is not a zero-sum game. Just because someone else is doing well does not mean that there's somehow less of the pie for you, if that makes sense. And when I've thought about these situations, when someone else is doing well, the more that I've realized that I really, at the end of the day, don't want what they have, whether it's a particular job or a field of expertise that they've really excelled in. And I think that's very important and healthy to recognize too, is you've got to think through the entire journey for them. You cannot just highlight the success, because if you really want what they have, are you willing to embrace all the challenges, the difficulties? If it took them 2 years to build up to that reward, well, scratch off the last 2 years of your life. Are you willing to sacrifice that? Those are the kind of thoughts that you have to have. You have to think about the full picture, put it in perspective, and really think, I mean, do you really want what they have at the end of the day? The other thing that I want to add, and this is under the same point here, is I think we as humans can subconsciously just read each other's energy. Call it a sixth sense, if you will. But I can tell you from experience, and I'm not going to give a specific example, but in the situations where I have been genuinely happy and congratulated people for their success, those are the exact same people that keep me in their network today and are also happy for me when wins come my way. And wins come to everyone. It's funny because it's just this roller coaster of ups and downs, and you may very well be comparing your trough to someone else's peak, and that's not a fair comparison whatsoever. A comparison is something that you shouldn't have in your mind anyway. Where they say comparison is the thief of joy. But at the same time, too, I just think put everything in perspective and do actively try to congratulate others on the wins that do try to congratulate others on the wins that come their way. The next thing I want to share is, I think, one of the most important things I want to get across in this video, and forgive the lack of clarity here because it's taken me some time just to outline this idea, but it's the following. Every effort doesn't always have to be for your gain. I think one of the biggest issues that people struggle with, at least younger people, and I say this obviously as a younger person, is uncertainty of the future, and more specifically with asking the question, is what I'm doing right now actually going to be worth my time in the long run? For example, I've been spending the last 6 or 7 months learning to code. I've been doing this for multiple hours a day. I have people teaching me, and I enjoy it. It's certainly a fun process. I don't know what exactly I'm going to do with that skill set. There are things I want to build, and that's my why behind learning. But admittedly, every single time I do sit down, I open up the computer, I practice, or I watch a lesson, I'm always asking myself, is this actually going to benefit me in the long run? What if I find out that I fail, and then I'm going to feel really bad about this wasted time? I'm someone who wants to answer that question as quickly as possible. And in the past, with different projects in my life, I've gone headfirst into these projects and completely tuned out any other request for my time, often to my own detriment. Maybe there was something fun that I wanted to do. It was a cool opportunity, or someone was asking me to help them, but I turn down those requests because, well, they didn't move the needle along for me. Where the mental shift really occurred was when I was able to put my thumb on one or two things in particular. I want to give you an analogy actually to drive this point home in just a second, but I want to preempt that with a Harvard study that I want to link down below this video if you want to read up on it. Fascinating read. But what it essentially did in brevity was track the lives of 700 plus different people. They would interview them every single year. They did this for about 70 years. It's one of the longest studies out there. It started around, I want to say, the 1940s, and you can read the specific dates down below. But they were essentially trying to answer the question, fulfillment at the end of your life, what does that really come down to? But what was really interesting is that they found, and there are many conclusions, but one of them was that fulfillment actually depended on your investment of time into a lot of different things. You can argue that wealth maybe is a big part of success, but there's also health. There's your relationships with others, which was one thing that they really highlighted. There's also your self-worth, what you think of yourself. If you just choose to have tunnel vision on one of these and only focus on your gain and maybe building up wealth, for example, well, that's going to result in a lot of these other things being thrown to the wayside. And this study found that the happiest people actually focused on multiple different avenues. If the takeaway there is not clear, I know that was kind of muddled. Let me give you an analogy to really encapsulate this point. Think of your life as kind of like an automobile. Ultimately, you're driving towards some sort of a destination. Now, if you can map out ahead of time where exactly or vaguely where you want to end up, I think that's great, even better. But what you don't want to do is simply just keep your eyes locked on the gray and yellow that's flying by the roadway and put on your horse blinders. No, you look at what's around you, the surrounding beauty. You look at the sky, you look at the trees, the scenery that you pass. If your neighbor flags you down on the side of the road needing help with the changed tire, you get out and help him. That's what makes the drive worthwhile, all those little experiences. Sure, you can argue, you could grind out that 10-hour drive, you can put the pedal to the metal, and you could not take any rest stops, but at the end you would look back and you'd kind of detest that entire travel experience. So I hope that made sense. The point here is that what you'll be thanking yourself for later on down the road, and what I found I've thanked myself for just in these past 5, 6, 7 years alone, has not been the investment of my time into just one thing in particular, trying to make every single waking effort lead to my gains somehow. And sure, maybe coding is not going to be brought to fruition in the way that I think it's going to be. That's okay. Sometimes people take wrong routes. You've got to review the roadmap. At least you become a better driver at the end of the day. You know where not to go. But I think as long as you try to have a healthy investment of your time into multiple things, sure, you've got your career, you've also got your health, your relationships, your self-worth. I think all of that in combination, at least from my experience, has made the journey so far worthwhile. The next thing I want to share very briefly is instant gratification and the novelty effect. The novelty effect is actually a scientific timeline that's based on a lot of different studies, but it states that something is only new to us, or novel, hence the title, for a maximum of 33 days. If I buy a car tomorrow, that car is only going to seem fresh, new, for a little over a month, and then everyone's going to find out that I have it. I'm going to start to find all the flaws in the car the more that I use it, and my levels of satisfaction are going to return to what they are right now when I don't have the car, and I'll be looking on the horizon for what's next. I think just this idea of being aware of the newness of something and how that only lasts for a little while has definitely made me a lot more conscious about some of the potentially big purchase decisions that I would have made otherwise. In contrast, society operates based on this hamster wheel of consumption to the max, consuming the latest and greatest product. What do we call this? The shiny object syndrome or something along those lines. There's a statistic out there, don't quote me on this, but it's, I believe 75% of all our purchase decisions are based on temporary emotions. You see someone, or temporary impulses. You see someone that has a new car, well, in that moment you succumb to the desire of wanting something similar, and a lot of us do act on those decisions. I think just being aware and recognizing that what you want is only going to tide you over in the short term, and instant gratification, purchasing things based on your temporary impulses is only going to last a certain amount of time, and calculating that novelty effect in your decisions is just important to recognize, not to mention the amount of money that it'll end up saving you in the process. The next thing I want to share very briefly is to eliminate pleonasms from your sentences, or from my sentences. This is not one of those life-changing things, but it's one of those little subtle practical things that once I became conscious of it, I felt I became more confident, and I noticed other people started to take me a little bit more seriously. Pleonasms or pleonisms are buffer words, filler words that we often use when we communicate. Words like so, but, and. I'm sure there's a lot more that I'm forgetting. I certainly do not claim to make use of less of these in my sentences. This video is testimony enough against my argument. I was reading this in a book recently. Language is one of those things that's really undergone such a dramatic transformation in the last 50 to 60 years, at least the English language. In my opinion, it's been for the worse. People are far less articulate than they used to be, and I think the ability just to speak directly, not have a lot of fluff in your word choice, is a very, very powerful tool in your arsenal. It's tricky at first because as an alternative to using a word like when we think or when we're about to start a sentence, what's the alternative? Well, we can pause, and a pause, it just seems out of place in our traditional, typical rapid-fire conversations that we have with other people. There's a quote out there that this reminds me of: music is the space between the notes. In the same way, I think often the impact and the true emphasis that we can have with our sentences is our pauses, the space between the words, so to speak. That may not be the best analogy, but I would just encourage you, and that's certainly something that I'm trying to foster as well, to be more conscious of your word choice and to eliminate as much of those buffer words as possible. You'll notice a lot of business magnates and successful people will sometimes do this, but they'll also just be very conscious of what they say. They'll take a few minutes to recollect their thoughts, and then they'll go ahead and deliver with an answer. So I think it's just good to emulate that practice. The last thing I want to share, I think, is one of the most important realizations that I've come to, at least specifically in this last year alone. That's the following idea. It's not a race. You don't always have to finish first. For the longest time, I always had this sentiment that I had to be the best at everything. This is not me being narcissistic or anything like that. I genuinely don't know how many people can relate to this or have dealt with this in some way. Maybe it's just me. But I would find myself angry or jealous when I found out someone had the same hobby as me, or they would be in the same market competitively. And I would end up disappointed or frustrated when I found out that these people were genuinely better than me. They were truly better at a certain craft, for example. And I realized that this I have to be the best at everything always mindset stems from having a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. Someone actually told me this, and so I want to share this idea with you. In the past, there are certain things that we did where we felt like we were on top. Whether it was college, certain skill sets, something career-oriented, we would find ourselves in this fixed mindset of trying to preserve that status and not doing anything that could potentially jeopardize that success or make us look like a fool in some way. I guess in this scenario, we would kind of think of our worth as something innately, where we could only lose it and not gain any more of it. That's the wrong way of looking at things. The alternative, or in contrast, there's what's known as the growth mindset, the student mindset, where you focus on being better than you are right now, leveling up your abilities, recognizing that you have not reached your full potential, and there will always be people out there who are better than you. The great irony of humanity, and this is me going off on a little bit of a side tangent, is the fact that we often envy other people thinking they have it all, ignorant to the fact that when we get to that position, we're still going to be envying someone else. We'll still view someone else as better than us in some way. So yes, there is competition out there. That's okay. It's not necessary to be first. In fact, the odds are stacked against you, and it's improbable that you will finish first. But I think just recognizing that keeping your head down, focusing on doing one thing each day that can make yourself better tomorrow than you were yesterday will actually probably give you a greater probability of finishing first than if you constantly viewed everyone around you with that fixed mindset as a danger to your status. It's the same reason why horse jockeys in horse racing will actually keep their horses looking forward with blinders on. If they're constantly glancing to the side of their competition, it's going to result in them losing momentum and being distracted from the finish line. So that about concludes this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope there was something you took away here. I appreciate you just being willing to listen to the ramblings of a 21-year-old. Listen, I know this was kind of unstructured. There's not much of a call to action for this video. Maybe leave a like down below. Consider subscribing if you want to hear more of this. And we'll catch you guys next time and see you around the channel. Take care.